As the new baseball season dawns, welcome once again to the Ballpark Digest Broadcaster Chat with Mick Gillispie. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, joined by Ballpark Digest Kevin Reichard. First, Mick, good to see you on the eve of another season.
Yeah, great to see you guys too. It's exciting this time of year. Hope springs eternal, right? So everyone has a chance, and here we are. What a weekend to less than a weekend to games. So spring training started, and it's a good time of year.
Kevin Reichard, good to see you as well. How are you as we approach the start of the Major League season?
Oh boy, I cannot wait until I head to Phoenix on Sunday, because we just had 18 inches of snow here over the weekend, a couple more for tonight, and I can't wait to get out of Dodge and go someplace, even if it's only in the 50s and 60s.
When you get that many inches, you can just say 1.5 feet.
I guess so. I mean, it drifted to about 7 feet on my deck, so it's all relative.
Whew. I'm 5'6", so
you'd be buried.
That's where I currently stand with all of this. Living in Michigan, the great thing about basketball season is no rainouts, and the bad thing about basketball season is ice storms. So I guess it's time to pull some tarp again for me.
There you go.
As we approach this baseball season, it seems to me that the big topic that has been dominating in the Grapefruit League and the Cactus League has been the rule changes. And this is where you and me, Mick, were kind of like the people who saw the band playing at the local bar before they hit nationwide and everyone else gets to ring in with their opinion. We got to see the different rule changes in effect, and now everybody else is getting a chance to experience them. Let's take them one by one. And I want to start with one that not too many people have commented on yet, as far as I've seen, which is the 2 infielders on each side of second base, infielders on the dirt.
Yeah, look, I like this one. Honestly, I don't think that it's one that they should have put in. I mean, the hitter should be able to move around in the box and take advantage of defenses that are out of position, but the skill of the hitter isn't the same as the skill of the hitters that we had growing up. I mean, there's no disrespect to those guys, but trying to compare what Will Clark or Pete Rose or Wade Boggs or Tony Gwynn did at the plate to what we see now, it just isn't the same game. And so it definitely took the offense out of of the game, because these guys just couldn't hit out of the shift, So we took the shift away in the Southern League, and then you had to have, like you said, 2 fielders on either side of the bag like it used to be. You couldn't have someone playing like, shallow outfield. I remember calling a spring training game, and Chris Bryant was at third, and then, I was talking to Len Casper. We're doing the game together, and I look up, and there's a ground ball that Chris Bryant fields in right field and throws to first, and I don't even know it's him. I mean, because he had shifted over, and I just thought, I don't know that this is how baseball was really meant to be. So I liked not having it last year in the Southern League, just because it was selfishly a lot easier to call the game, and then on the other hand, it just felt more like baseball.
Yeah. Kevin, do you have any thoughts?
I don't have particularly strong thoughts. I know shifts have been around since the beginning of the game. Ted Williams faced shifts, and if it was good enough for Ted Williams, it's good enough for me, but I'm not summoning a lot of passion on the issue, quite bluntly. So fine, let's not shift.
The thing that I'm going to be watching carefully is they put into the Florida State League last year the pie wedge rule, where they drew the lines around second base to make the slice of a pie shape, the wedge. And that way you couldn't play your infielder directly back of second base. That's what we would see all the time. That's what's still all right at the major league level, is you put that second baseman right back of second, and then he inches over a little to his left. And that way you still have 2 infielders on either side. I mean, it's good hitting to hit the ball right back up the middle. You want to stay right through it. As long as there's an infielder back of second base, you can still cut down on those hits. So I'm curious to see if what they tried in the Florida State League ever comes. And they actually had to chalk the lines out on the field to say, don't cross these lines. Another item, and I'm going to get to our baseball lingo real quick here, because with the introduction of the new sized base from 18 to 18 instead of 15 by 15, I don't know if you two heard this, but I heard the term pizza box being thrown around a ton. These new bases are pizza boxes. Mick, what do you think of the bigger bases?
Yeah, I don't know if I coined that, but I started saying it last year really early in the thing that they reminded me of pizza boxes. And I guess that just being a dad and buying pizza a lot, I saw the box and I said, they look like pizza boxes. The story that I got from the Cubs organization is that this is Theo Epstein's rule and that he's the one that came up with this because he was hoping to get more action on the bags, like more guys stealing just because the bags would be a little bit bigger. And that's really not why this was enacted. It was enacted because of safety, right? So I think he was as surprised as all of us that they would do it because they're going, hey, you know what? Maybe having a little more space on either side of the bag will prevent injuries. At first I thought, well, I don't know. I didn't really like it that much. But then I just felt like it really didn't make much of a difference at all. Like you start watching the game and it's not that noticeable, and if it prevents someone from colliding at first base, then maybe it's worth it. I'm not one of these guys that feels like we need to be tinkering with all the rules and changing. I don't think that's why baseball's popularity is going down. But as far as like the impact on the game itself, I just didn't notice a whole lot.
The thing to watch with the tinkering, what they tried to do last year in the Midwest League was they moved the far corner of the base, the corner that was closest to center field.
Mm-hmm.
They moved that in halfway through the year. They moved the base closer to the pitcher's mound, and you could tell it's closer. It's in. There's a lot more room back of second base towards center field. I also saw one of my very first injuries on a base. We had a base stealer, successful steal of second base, dislocate his elbow. I like, in theory, the first baseman has room to put his foot. The runner has room to put his foot. But I do think the messaging that this is all about health gets confused with the messaging of if the bases are larger, that diminishes the baseline, and that means much more successful stolen bases.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, what are your thoughts on the pizza boxes?
I saw them some last year. After about a half inning, I didn't really even notice them. I think one thing to keep in mind is that, like everything in baseball, players are larger than they used to be. And, it's not as though Frank Howard was ever steaming toward first base about to beat out an infield hit. But there's a lot of big guys who run really well these days. And I think making the base a little bit bigger is an acknowledgement that these big guys, as well as the first baseman, both need room for safety. I think it's a sound. I don't think it matters all that much, quite honestly. I think they're going to tinker with the positioning, though, Jesse. I think you're absolutely right about that, because at some point they're going to realize there's a lot of infield hits that really shouldn't be infield hits.
Hey, let me say this too, Jesse. I think you'll like this.
Yeah.
We were talking about that, because they did the same thing in the Southern League. They moved the second base closer in. And the reasoning behind that, and I'm sure you know this already, is because when they first had the bases out there, the first and third base were in foul territory. So the second base was positioned in a way where, it would be kind of a diamond based off of those bags being in foul territory, right? So then they put them in fair territory to kind of make up for the fact that when they moved the bases into fair territory, they never readjusted second base. Which I thought was a good explanation. But I kind of liked it where it was. It looked fine up the middle, deeper. And then for the playoffs, they moved it back to where it was originally, and so all that, just to test it. So I haven't heard any momentum for doing that at the big league level, but the way that all of these things go, they'll be announcing that in the offseason next year.
Well, and for the minor leagues, it'll be a couple of weeks before our year, and they'll suddenly say, by the way, here's your new rule.
Yeah, right.
I think that this now brings us to the pitch clock, right? Is there any rule that we need to touch on before we get there? Because I wanted to make sure that we save the pitch clock for the time that it deserves. That's what's getting the vast amount of conversation, and deservedly so, because whereas with the pizza boxes, okay, you get used to it. With the shift, you might never notice it. You notice the pitch clock, and you especially notice how long a game takes. And as soon as all of the games ended on Saturday, I saw a ton of social media posts about here's how long the games are taking. When Manny Machado committed the first pitch clock infraction, that gained notice. When was it the Boston Red Sox Atlanta Braves game that clocked out? They clocked off the game on a 3-2 pitch. The batter took too long and the game was over. So, pitch clock. And Kevin, I want to start with you with your thoughts.
I like the pitch clock. I like shorter games. I think it's a very societal evolution sort of thing to keep games to as close to 2.5 hours as possible for many, many reasons. And I have no problem with it. I think the players will adjust. I think there's been a lot of hoo-ha that won't necessarily play out. I mean, everyone's saying, well, first 2 games of spring training, yada, yada, yada. The first 2 games of spring training aren't televised. And honestly, we're going to see some tweaks to this, because at some point, the national sponsors are going to say, well, maybe there should be a little extra time in between innings. And so 2.5 hours, 2:11 even, some of the games came in with. That's nirvana. But I think when the regular season starts, it'll inch back up. And then I think once playoffs start, we're going to be back to 3, just because TV is going to drive a whole lot of stuff. So I would like to see the game times at the end of spring training, when almost every game's televised, versus the ones now when virtually no games are being televised.
Mick?
Look, I liked it. Somewhere along the line, the game changed where, you used to be able to play 15 innings in a game, and it would still be like 2 hours somehow. Right. And then in the 80s, with 2.5 hours. And then all of a sudden it became fashionable to walk and foul balls off, and, and not a lot of action, not getting the ball in play, and all this other stuff. Walk up songs where everybody wants to hear, they got to walk in, step out of the box, adjust batting gloves. So when they did the pitch clock at first, I thought, well, this is a waste of time. But then they tweaked it and they threw it back out last year. And we're getting out of the ballpark 45 minutes early, half hour early. The game's going faster. And it's great, and it's great. I can't wait to see the reaction of some of the players, because there are some weird rules with this pitch clock. I saw a guy last year who slipped on the mound and the ball flew out of his hand, no one on base. And they called a pitch clock violation. And I'm going, is this really the spirit of this rule? And then the umpires told somebody to tell me, because they heard it, that's what we're supposed to be doing pretty much, And I said, well, you know what, if that's the way that it's supposed to be interpreted, I don't agree with that, but I get it, and those guys are doing their job. So there's going to be more of that kind of stuff happening where you're like, but all in all, the bottom line is that the game's got to be faster. People just want to get in and get out of the ballpark. Being there for 3.5, 4 hours, it just doesn't work. And so is it the saving grace for baseball? No, I don't think that's it. But I do think that it's beneficial when, the games go in 2.5, 3 hours instead of 4. And I think that's what the rule's supposed to be. And it works.
Thing about the umpires, Mick, they watch the broadcasts back. Every umpire watches back that broadcast to see, how did I do on this call? How did I do on that call? Oh, this broadcaster's ragging on me.
Yeah. We had a guy last year that, I guess, the best moment of last season, outside of, some of the no-hitters and some of the other stuff that we got to do. There was an umpire that had one of these old time calls, like he would and I loved him. I mean, just loved him. He did a good job. There was a little slight delay. He reminded me of an umpire from the 80s. Mm-hmm. And we just got to laughing about that on the air. And we were just we decided that we were going to do our favorite umpire call. And then I started I don't know why, but it made me laugh really hard. And then people came to the booth and said that, that they kind of got to laughing about that too, so I would incorporate the called strike three hoo-ha every once in a while based off of the situation, but all going back to that day when we were watching this one specific umpire behind the plate, call the game. And it just reminded me just the way that his body language was and stuff. There was like that slight delay they used to have. And he did a good job. Like the ones that you don't recognize, normally it's because they're really good at it.
There was an old baseball blooper video, super duper baseball bloopers, where Mudcat Grant, now on the Padres broadcast team, he did his impression of every single umpire's strike three call. And it's such a good segment.
Is it? He's a good dude. I met him. I had gotten these old school broadcasts, right? And you'll appreciate this. One of them was like the 1971 playoffs between Baltimore and Oakland. And at the beginning of it, Mudcat Grant is singing the national anthem. And so when I met Mudcat, I said, "Hey, I've got this old CD, and you're singing the national anthem." Now he's on the team for the A's, but he's singing the national anthem like game 2 or something.
There are two different Mudcats. There's Jim Mudcat Grant.
Okay.
And there's Mark Mudcat Grant. So Jim Grant came first. Mark Grant is now on the Padres broadcast team. So I think you're talking
different
about the
Mudcat.
first. Yeah.
I'm talking about the other Mudcat, Jim.
It's like when you talk about Pudge. Well, there was Pudge, who was Carlton Fisk, who was Pudge the Elder. Then Pudge the Younger and Ivan Rodriguez came up.
I'm glad you specified, because I'd never heard of the other Mudcat. I just met this Mudcat who is signing autographs with Fergie and friends, and interviewed him and talked about. He said that him and his family, I guess, had toured around and sung. Like they would do that in the off season, and so he sung the national anthem. And on that same broadcast, apparently someone called in a bomb threat to the A's airplane, on their way back from Baltimore to Oakland. So I think it was probably one of the players. I mean, you were just to mess with the other team.
Wow. In those times, in the 1970s, flying could be dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, think about that.
Oh, goodness. Well, and you think about the name Mudcat. They were the Carolina Mudcats. Like, I think about Mudcat being a great minor league baseball team name. There was a clock violation the other day, to take it back to the pitch clock, that I'd never seen before. It was called on both the pitcher and the hitter. The pitcher did not finish his warm-up pitches in time. The hitter did not step into the batter's box in time. And it was like it was a softball game. The count began at 1 ball, 1 strike.
Yeah. Hey, that's a way to get everybody's attention, though.
Well, and that's what we had at the very start of last year. The umpires gave everybody, a 3-day grace period. And then they started calling everything. And it was hard line. And so as we started off, just to get through that first week, you had multiple calls. And I saw clock violations, 2 of them called on the same pitcher in the same half inning, things like that. But then as the year went on, umpires got more understanding and teams understood how to adjust. So you knew that if that clock was ticking down on the pitcher and the pitcher wasn't ready, the catcher would suddenly stand up and call for time. The batter knew exactly when to use his timeout and his at-bat. The pitching coach was looking up there at that clock, and suddenly you'd see him vault out of the dugout to save a pitcher a clock violation. There were all sorts of different things that they had their head on a swivel just in case they saw that clock violation. Or you know what? If you needed to have one, you had it. But teams started to really see what they could do to mess with it and make it work to their advantage as the year wore on. And I think that's what we're going to see from the smarter teams at the major league level.
Yeah, maybe. What do you think about the rule that you can't throw to first base to pick off more than twice?
So from what I heard of teams that, once again, the word that comes to mind for me is abuse it. What teams would do is they would throw over twice bad moves, really bad moves. And then the runner would get overconfident because you can't throw over again. It's a balk. And that's when the pitcher would use the really good move and nail him. So because as long as you're throwing the runner out, it's okay to throw over a third time. I think once again, it's something that's going to separate. A pitcher who's not comfortable with it is going to have runners steal on him all the time. And this is exactly what they want. I'm going to look at the Oakland A's. So the Oakland A's traded Sean Murphy to the Braves, but involved in this deal was that the Athletics wanted Esteury Ruiz. And so the Brewers got involved as a third team, and that way Ruiz would come to the A's. Why? Because Oakland is seeing this coming year as a year where you need to get faster, when teams that are aggressive on the bases are going to have an advantage, and they are looking to seize that advantage. So I'm going to be very interested to see which teams are aggressive on the bases to take advantage of the different rules aiding base stealers this season.
Someone wrote a piece about the Miami Marlins being another team exactly like that is built for speed right now and to take advantage of the new rules.
I mean, that's what it all comes to, is teams taking a gamble on something that they think puts them ahead of the curve. Because there are so many places where teams are so close, using the same stats, using the same technology. So maybe this is the difference.
How are some of these guys going to adjust, though? I mean, someone brilliantly superimposed a Zach Greinke pitch, superimposed it over the Kentucky Derby, and showing that he takes longer to deliver a pitch than the entirety of the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
I would love to see the first game where he's facing this.
Pedro Baez. There's been a bit coming out with Pedro Baez against Landon Knack, that Landon Knack in spring training threw an entire half inning. And it was not a 3-pitch half inning. There were multiple pitches and multiple at-bats. And yet it was quicker than Pedro Baez could throw one pitch.
Yeah, how is not every pitcher in a system not like Greg Maddux, and looking at his tapes and realizing he was so successful because he got in a rhythm and delivered fast?
Kevin, there's an easy answer to that from my mind. And Mick, I would like to hear what you say. To my mind, it's the same reason why Max Scherzer feels that the pitch clock favors the pitcher, or Aaron Judge feels that the pitch clock favors the hitter. Maddux was good. That's a Hall of Fame talent. That's one of the greatest pitchers ever, who could execute multiple pitches and put them exactly wherever he wanted them. If a pitcher is good, the batter is at his mercy, and it's the batter trying to slow things down and trying to get the pitcher off rhythm. But if the batter is the one who's good, then the pitcher is trying to do desperately whatever he can do to shake the batter's rhythm. And the pitch clock, I would think, is going to say, no, this is the rhythm. Neither one of you two is going to dictate. So I would think that the better batter or the better pitcher would therefore succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of thoughts on this. First, this is one of those rules that I don't mind. I guess here I am kind of saying I'm a purist and I like all the rules, right? Well, this one, I was broadcasting a game in college one time, Alabama against Mississippi State. John Cohen, who's now the AD at Auburn, but he was the baseball coach at Mississippi State at the time. Alabama had a lot of momentum, and he wanted to slow the game down, and Alabama was scoring runs, and you could feel like that there was a big inning coming. He had his pitcher throw to first base probably 10 straight times. And it was such an abuse of the rule, like it was just such an abuse of like what that is. The guy standing on first base, and he would still throw over there because he wanted to give the bullpen more time to warm up, and he wanted to squelch Alabama's momentum. Right. So this rule, I always think of that. And then we've had some battles with the Marlins organization, and it's the Smokies have. And they would use the visit to the mound to do the same thing, like just go out there, take their time, constantly come out, and just basically kill the momentum of the game as a strategic move, So, they already enacted that, and then obviously this rule to try to get the action going. I don't know that it necessarily benefits the runner or the pitcher. I think you're right. I mean, most of the time, the one with more talent is going to win out, right? Someone like Greg Maddux is going to beat you no matter how they put the rules out there. As a matter of fact, he'd probably figure out the best way to use this and turn it into an advantage for him. This because not only was he a great pitcher, but he was a great defender, and he was he's a really smart dude. So, but if you had Ricky Henderson at first base, bigger bags, and he knows that you're not throwing over there, guess what? His jump's going to be probably 2 or 3 steps more than what he would have had. And he was a master of getting a jump anyway. But to show you how bad the game of baseball is when it comes to base running, think about John Lester, who couldn't throw to first base, like physically just couldn't do it, right? He had an issue, like where he had the thing, he had to basically, it was crazy. You'd be at a game watching, and if someone had a lead, it was like watching a little leaguer throw the ball left-handed in their right-handed. He just couldn't do it. Yet it wasn't like guys were stealing all over him. Like he was good at looking at you, and so I think that teams like you guys were saying, like teams like the Marlins, or maybe the old St. Louis Cardinals, the way they used to run, eventually you could take advantage of this. Eventually, I think that this will benefit the base runners, but I just don't think the game's there yet.
There's an apocryphal story of Lefty Gomez holding the ball and holding the ball and holding the ball with a big slugger at home plate. And finally they say, "What are you waiting for?" And he said, "I'm hoping the batter gets a phone call."
Good line, anyway.
Lefty Gomez was filled with lines. That's why the banquet scene, he dominated during the season, went to the Hall of Fame, dominated the banquet scene in the offseason. Kevin, let's turn to you. So there are the new rules. Let's talk about the business side, and let's talk about the spring training side. What is new on your side when it comes to Grapefruit League, Cactus League, and the upcoming season?
Well, we're sort of in a COVID hangover period in terms of anything to do with ballparks in both states. There's been very few renovations the last couple of years. Next year should see the Philadelphia Phillies overhaul Baycare. You will see the Cardinals and Marlins overhauling Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium. And you will see some other teams tackle some fairly big projects. But this year, kind of dull. Like I said, I'm going out there, but I'm not expecting to see a whole lot new in terms of, concessions or ballpark features or anything like that. But, other than that, the game's kind of in turmoil. It is a lot of things going on that Major League Baseball may have known was going to be a problem, but really wasn't prepared for it. You have the implosion of the Bally RSNs, and I believe one other big RSN vendor announced plans to get out too, trying to sell. Was it NBC? It was one of the secondary ones, and so you've got baseball sort of having to figure out how to get revenue from broadcasts at a time when the RSNs aren't supplying it anymore. And baseball typically reacts. They don't act very well. And this is a case where you're going to see teams miss out on some early season RSN payments. You're going to see some teams figuring out how to pay for things. And we're already in the midst of tremendous change on the broadcast front with streaming. More people stream now than watch cable for the first time. And that's just going to get even worse as we go along. So baseball kind of has to come up with a plan. And I don't think that the current leadership has the wherewithal to do that. They're a little old. They're a little stuck in their ways. They're used to dictating terms and, to Comcast, dictate terms to some of your cable partners. That's for sure.
Yeah, look, I've got a lot of opinions on this too. I mean, just watching, the organization that I've spent time around, and you decide to build a network based off of the way that things were run 20 years ago instead of the way that things are going to be run in 20 years. And the biggest thing that I feel like them and all the other teams have to do, look at your internal productions. A lot like what ESPN does with ESPN Plus. Get rid of a lot of the old management guys that are TV driven, analog guys, and get younger people. Get younger people that get the digital age. overspending for talent. You don't have to do that anymore. There was a team that just had a broadcast opening, and they paid substantially less than the guy that left the job, less than half. And, maybe the talent, we'll find out how the talent's going to be. I don't think it's going to be that much of a difference than what they had. But the bottom line is this, is that what you're doing on YouTube, what you're doing with your podcasting, what you're doing in-house, you don't need analog television. And a lot of that stuff you can just put on analog, but you base it through digital. And, we did the webcast on MLB.com and Cubs.com back when not a lot of people knew how to get it. And then all of a sudden, we stopped doing it, and it's what everybody does now. Like you can just get it on your phone. You can put it on your computer. You can watch it on your television. You can listen on your television, And I just feel like that is the issue here, is that you got people making decisions that are so behind the times. And this is industry thing. This isn't just one particular team. It's an absolute mess. And now the other part of this is that you can't base it off of what the NFL does, because Major League Baseball is not the NFL. People don't watch they watch the NFL whether their team's playing or not. A lot of that has to do with fantasy football and gambling. But I mean, I'll watch a game based off of who's on my fantasy team. It could be teams that, are out on the West Coast or whatever. Baseball is just not the same way. It's a different world. It's more regional. So as this transition happens, I think that if I was a team president, and I've thought about this a lot, I would totally dismantle my networks, and I would bring it in-house, and I'd go get people that are younger that understand the digital part of it. I'd still make sure that we have a really killer broadcast, but to think that you're going to be able to find 24 hours of programming on an analog station, that's just not going to happen. And I'm not just talking about the team ones. I'm talking about these other regional networks that, like, hey, we got a high school football game, and we got, I don't know, Reds baseball, and then the rest of it, no one wants to watch, right? The way that people do things now is a la carte. And I think that the future, which is probably going to be really soon, are all of these teams pulling in their broadcasts and doing it all in-house digitally.
No, I think it's instructive you're absolutely right. The NFL is a terrible template for all this, because NFL games are events. Mm-hmm. Baseball games aren't events. But look at what MLS is doing. No more local broadcasts in MLS. They took it all in-house. They took it all under the Apple TV umbrella. So you can subscribe via Apple TV. They will not be having dedicated crews as of right now to broadcast national games, basically on Apple TV. They'll just carry the local guys. And it's interesting that a few teams have chosen to raid minor league baseball for broadcasters. St. Louis, for instance, SC, in their model for what they view as the broadcast of the future. Now, revenue-wise, not as good as what, say, the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Angels are receiving right now. So this is going to cause a lot of course, the big market teams want to keep the current system because they have really good rights payments. But those rights payments aren't going to be around in 2 or 3 years. Right. So it's going to be a really crude transition for a lot of these teams to the new reality, and it won't be pretty.
And let me say this too. The other thing, and this is my other advice for team presidents and GMs and owners that are watching, and I'm sure the entire league's doing that right now, invest in the best salespeople that are in your market that can actually go out and sell your product. Instead of investing and overspending for, I'm going to go out and get the biggest name in broadcasting, go get the biggest name in sales. Because you're going to make your money back, because you're going to need that person when you go out and you're selling it yourself. You put someone on like the I don't know, the Cubs payroll, and they're on the set, you know, they're I'm sure that retirement and all of the stuff that they're getting to be a part of that is going to be better than whatever they're going to get at their local media, because the same thing's happening with the television industry as well. And so the same thing with the radio industry, which has actually been a lot stronger than I thought it was going to be at this point, right? Because of podcasting and everything else, but radio's gone local and they've kind of found their niche, right? So that's where I would invest. Look, if I was the team president, I'm going in and I'm, you know, all the dinosaurs are getting out. I'm going and getting young guys that you were talking about A's Cast. One of my former interns used to be one of the guys that ran it, Joey Liberatore. I'm going to get people like Joey that can come in, brainstorm, bring positive change to the market. And then my investment's going to be, hey, I'm going to get some guys that can go out there and do this and put a good show on the air. But at the same time, where I'm going to invest is getting the best salespeople that I can get, because it's all about the bottom line. So if I have the best salespeople with the best contacts that are driven, then, you know, we'll be able to reach our financial goals, which is what the problem is right now. I mean, you look at it, the problem is that the reason that they can't make these payments is that it's the entire structure is wrong. Like, it's bad. You can't make it. It's a bad business model.
But now that MLB has the minor league baseball streaming rights, they don't need anything else. They can just show you on an infinite loop there, Mick.
And look, yeah, and let me say this, you know, just as a guy that's a veteran broadcaster, that doesn't really care about exposure, I just feel like part of that too is you know, they should be paying us. You know, if they're going to use our voices and our stories and, you know, and our expertise, it'd be nice to get something out of it, you know, and the whole game plan is just to take it, not give us anything, which is kind of typical of baseball when it comes to the minor leagues. You know, I mean, that's the problem that they've ran into with their players. If they would have just been a little bit more giving in the past, because the money's there, they probably wouldn't be in the situation they are right now, where the guys want to have a union and, you know, and you had to contract teams because the facilities weren't good and all that. Now, I'm not saying that it's all their fault. It's also some of the owners of the minor league teams too, but it's always kind of felt like, you know, you were the very poor relative of the plantation owner being in the minor leagues. And that's kind of how we've been treated. And it's just another example when, you know, your game's on television in Chicago and you're not getting paid $1 for it. How's that make any sense? Right. But you're going to pay another guy $700,000 to do the same job, you know?
I want to go back to that topic of local versus national, because I'm really interested by that. The searching for national sponsors for minor league baseball teams, when it's the local places that really have made those teams go, and people know them. And just like you were talking about, Mick, getting that fresh voice in there, fresh face in there, but finding it local, especially when it comes to on the broadcast side, as we see, and Kevin, you mentioned MLS going with the Apple broadcasters, and even that, it's the national. It's college football has its national broadcasters for the TV games. NFL has its national broadcasters, USFL, XFL. However, none of these has made the local broadcaster obsolete. And in fact, the local podcast, whether it's the team run or whether it's the fan run, the Locked On podcasts, whatever it might be, it's not like NFL teams are getting rid of their local radio broadcast. The fans of each team care about their side's perspective. They want to hear about their guys. They want to hear from their perspective, to learn more about them, to hear the emotion about a bad loss or about a great win. And that's where I keep on coming back to. If we all agree, as I believe this is the consensus, that baseball's appeal is local as compared to the NBA or the NFL, which has a much more national appeal because of the star-driven, or because of fantasy, or because of gambling. But if baseball is at its very heart local above all else, then that's got to be the heart of everything stemming from that. That's got to be the heart of the broadcast and the sponsors and everything else. So that's where, though I disagree with the whole philosophy of a sports talk broadcast, I get where it's coming from if it reflects the fans who are listening in or watching the game.
Well said. Well said. I'm sorry to take the show over. Let me say one more thing, Kev. I just got to, because he's right in my alleyway here. Is we have to do that. We're on a radio station in Knoxville that they don't care about the Cubs minor leaguers unless it's Chris Bryant and Javi Baez, but we're on like a real station. Like they're paying real money for us to be on the air. And, you know, if you go in there and just do straight play-by-play, I can hear all the dials turning off. You got to tell the stories, and you got to do the sports talk angle. And I don't mean like sports talk, like where I'm trying to be, you know, Dan Patrick, but I mean, you know, having a story that goes along with the inning, having maybe like an inning where you do trivia, or you know, we do this date in baseball history or whatever. I mean, like it has to be entertaining. And that's the only way that we've stayed on the air long before I got to the job. And then, you know, hopefully long after. But our fans expect that. The people that are listening expect that. You know, you're trying to keep the audience engaged, and the game might not be something that they're so interested in. So, you know, you got to find out what Kevin's got on Ballpark Digest. What I do you know, I look every single day. You got a good story. Where's Oakland going? Are they going to stay in Oakland, or are they going to Las Vegas, or where are they going to play? You know, like here's the 1-1 pitch that's in there for a strike, you know, like, so you're absolutely right on that. Being entertaining, especially at our level, I think it's a lot different than when you go do a Cubs game and there's 100,000 people locked into your broadcast on every pitch. All they care about is the game.
The reason, though, I love the Cubs, and which sort of scares me, is that the Cubs broadcasters, and I think even in the system, they are the storytellers. They take the time to do that. They're not the NFL style hoo-ha, what are we doing now? And, you know, it's very tribal on the NFL level, and baseball has sort of resisted that. And I hope they continue to resist that.
Even then, Kevin, though, we can see on the baseball side, different, whether it's the different coasts, the different cities, you can see which fan base does go more toward the analytical, which fan base really does care more about the people, which fan base cares, which broadcasts are funnier. Certain broadcasts across baseball are just funnier than other broadcasts, and that's exactly how their fans like it. They like their baseball not taken seriously, and I find that fascinating. It's very specific flavors.
I hope it continues. I really do. I mean, that's what makes listening to a Dodgers game or a Twins game or Royals or Cubs so lovely, is because the broadcasters are traditional broadcasters.
Well, I mean, as we look toward what's moving forward, as you said, we're in a period of turmoil. This is one area. We'll see how everything else comes about. But as we've gone back to, the best advertisement for baseball is always the baseball. When the game starts, that's what bonds all of us together.
Absolutely.
On that note, is there any last thoughts? Mick, last thoughts?
Look, it's great to hang out with you guys, and you kind of touched on some stuff that I've been thinking about a lot. You know, I never know what we're going to talk about. I mean, we kind of have like a little game plan at the beginning, but, you know, so much of this stuff is important to us because we've spent our life in this industry, you know, and I've been lucky to go to work at a place for a long time that it does it the right way, treats their people the right way. And is proud of that. Right. And not all the teams I feel like are that way, you know, but because I hear stories from other broadcasters or people that work for other organizations, and I'm like, man, I'm lucky to have been there. And I love the game of baseball, you know, like from the time I was a kid playing and coaching and umpiring and broadcasting and all that stuff. So I hope that, you know, I hope that some of this stuff works and that we can find that same passion that baseball used to have when I was a kid, you know. So getting together with you guys who kind of feel the same way is almost therapeutic, because I'm deeply concerned about the direction of the game. I just don't think kids want to play it anymore. It's become kind of a niche sport where rich kids can go out and play, and they tour around and they have like 5 uniforms. But kids like me, that just basically got off the bus and ran and got a glove and organized a game. I just don't know that that's happening anymore. I see that more with basketball and soccer or football. So anything that we can do to try to figure out a way to help the game, kind of like Tommy Lasorda, like be advocates for the game. I think that's important. And then the people that are watching the same thing. I mean, whether we agree or disagree on the medicine, I think we can all agree that there's a lot of work to be done right now to kind of save what is something that we all have a passion for.
Kevin, final thoughts.
My final thought is I totally agree with Mick on this. I think it's going to take a huge effort within the industry to acknowledge that there are issues to be taken and that everyone needs to be involved. And right now, I don't see that. I see baseball controlled by a very small set of insiders and who don't really see the need to build consensus around anything. And they'll dictate, they'll tell you what you should be doing without little warning usually. And that's it. And until that's changed, and it'll just be more dictates from above, and you run your baseball team like a McDonald's, and the passion's gone. And if there is passion, it should all be funneled upward. And that's a bad attitude to take, because grassroots baseball is going to save the sport.
And on that note, we clock out before we get called for a clock violation. For the pizza boxer, Mick Gillispie, the voice of the Tennessee Smokies, and Kevin Reichard, the publisher of Ballpark Digest, I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, and this has been a Ballpark Digest Broadcaster Chat.